Brown Armenian Student Association is honored to welcome former member of Turkish Parliament, Garo Paylan. Mr. Paylan served 2 terms from 2015 to 2023 as member of the People's Democratic Party. As one of the few Armenian voices in Turkish politics, Paylan has played a vital role in advancing the dialogue around Turkey-Armenian relations, historical justice, and reconciliation. Mr. Paylan's grandparents were genocide survivors from Malatya, a legacy that has deeply formed his commitment to truth and justice. Mr. Paylan has been adamant in fighting for the Armenian cause, enduring assassination attempts, racial slurs, and allegations of treason. Mr. Paylan is also an advocate of the normalization between Armenia and Turkey, viewing it as a crucial step toward regional peace and economic prosperity. Today, Mr. Paylan is a visiting scholar with the Europe program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Washington, D.C. Let's have a round of applause for our guest, Garo Paylan. So in the diaspora, we do not know too much about the Bolsahai Istanbul Armenian community. Many Armenians do not know that Armenians still live in Turkey, and even Istanbul is one of the largest diaspora communities with estimates of 50 to 70,000 Armenians still living there. Tell us about yourself and the average Bolsahai. How connected do you feel to Armenia, its prosperity, and its future? Do you feel at home when you're in Armenia?
In Turkey?
Yeah. So basically I'm saying, like, do the Armenians in Turkey feel Armenian, and to what extent?
Of course. Actually, after the Armenian Genocide, there were still 300,000 Armenians, Christian Armenians, living in Turkey, and there were hundreds of thousands of converted Armenians to Islam. And before the Armenian Genocide, there were again hundreds of thousands of people, maybe a million Armenians converted to Islam in several neighborhoods in Turkey. So when you say 50,000 Armenians living in Turkey, yeah, 50,000 Christian Armenians are living in Turkey. But we have millions of relatives who were converted to Islam. And we were silent for almost 19 years. And then that silence have ended when Turkey decided to change, to turn its face to Western capitals, to try to be member of the European Union. When Turkey decided to put its anchor in Western capitals. Then we benefited from it, and Kurdish struggle have started in the 80s, and they asked for their rights. Then a hero, Hrach, had the courage to talk about the past, that something terrible had happened, and about the future as well. So in Turkey, we dare to talk about the past and the future. So that's why actually we feel at home. And Turkey is not a diaspora for us. Of course, I'm from Malatya. You have ancestors from other cities, and so many people from here have ancestors from Diyarbakir, Kremengard, and other cities. But those are let's say, some people call it Western Armenia, or some people call it Anatolia, some people call it Kurdistan now. But it is home for us. It is our fatherland or motherland, and we are struggling to make that fatherland or motherland again a livable land for everyone, not only for Armenians, for everyone. But that's a romantic dream, of course. But nationalists from all parts are trying to make that land as Armenians' lands, Azeris' lands, or Turks' lands, or Kurds' lands. But that is, of course, causing so many catastrophes.
And what about when you do lots of interviews in Armenia, work with Armenian members of government? When you travel to Armenia, does it feel like travel? Does it feel like going to a different part of your homeland? What is that emotions for you?
Yeah, of course, no. We just faced several catastrophes in Turkey, and Turkish state, unfortunately, doesn't see us as equal citizens, of course. And when we see a police officer in Turkey, we fear from that police officer. But when you go to Armenia, you see a police officer who is an Armenian, who is an Armenian. Of course, you don't feel afraid of that police officer because he or she can commit a crime against you. So it is. I feel home in Turkey. It's my home, but it is my motherland, and Armenia, of course, because it is the last piece of land where my culture can thrive. I believe, because in Turkey, if we cannot make Turkey a democracy, we don't have any future. Let's say, as I said, 300,000 Armenians survived from the Armenian Genocide. If Turkey, after that catastrophe, became a democracy, let's say, just like Germany after the Holocaust became some kind of democracy, let's say, we could have been 3 million now, at least. 3, 4, 5 million Armenians could live in Armenia, Turkey. But we are only 50,000. This shows that unpunished crimes led to new crimes. So Armenians had to leave Turkey. So many of my relatives left Turkey. But my father decided to stay because he said we belong to here. And my father wanted to send me to American colleges when I was young. And I said, no, there is a struggle going on here. And I will try to make this country livable for everyone. That was a struggle that we gave. And so it feels like home, but that terrible ideology still governing Turkey doesn't see us as equal citizens, unfortunately.
As a strong reflection on your story, can you tell us a little more? How is it possible for an Armenian Turkey to reach such a high position while still maintaining a strong connection to their ancestral roots?
No, I was a member of the let's say the church community in Turkey. I mean, I was board member of an Armenian church, and Armenian school. I was dealing with Armenian schools, and I was only taking care of Armenian cause in Turkey. But then I learned that there are millions of people who care about us. And after Hrant Dink's assassination, hundreds of thousands of people just attended to that funeral saying that we are Armenians, we are Hrant, and we got to know each other. Then we started to fight together for democracy, and we learned from each other. We learned from our sufferings and our struggle. Then we started to fight together, and that is how I became a member of the Turkish Parliament. First, I was one of the founders of my party, People's Democratic Party. It was a diverse party. It was an umbrella party for everyone who was struggling for their rights. And I was one of the founding members of that party. Then I became an MP. And who chose me? Of course, not only Armenians. Majority of the Armenians voted for me, but it wasn't enough. So many Kurds and Turks voted for me to become a member of the Turkish Parliament. So I was not only the Armenians MP, I was People's MP, and we were the People's Democratic Party, but we just doubled or tripled our votes with this vision. But that was a threat for the Turkish state, and they tried to demolish our party and jail thousands of our friends, unfortunately.
In the diaspora, normalization with Turkey is seen as a very controversial topic. It is particularly emotional subject given the history of the Armenian Genocide and Turkey's involvement in the Azerbaijan invasion of Artsakh. Why is Armenia-Turkey normalization important, and what message do you have to those that have doubts?
I have been just advocating about Turkish-Armenian normalization for years, as you know. But some Armenians only saw me when I'm talking about the Armenian Genocide in the parliament, and they lynch me, the nationalist MPs lynching me. But I was always in favor of peace and reconciliation between Armenians and Turks. Because I knew that Turkey is benefiting from no engagement. Because when I first spoke in the Turkish parliament, everybody was looking at me. I understood that, oh, there is an Armenian here, and then they said, oh, he looks as us, but they were taught that Armenians are traitors. The only textbook, a sentence just passes there as an Armenian. Armenians are traitors. That's it. That's what they learned. And they started to engage with me, telling that, Garo, how can you be an Armenian? You are a good guy. Because they were taught that Armenians are traitors, bad people, whatever. Because their perception is all about this. I believe, whoever my friend Turk goes to Armenia, they say, oh, they are just like us. They eat like us. They dance like us. They love us like us, or they get mad at like us. Why do we need this border? Especially in the Kurdish neighborhoods, in the eastern part of Turkey is so much underdeveloped. And they know that if they open the borders, both sides will benefit from this. They will do trade, millions of tourists are going to go from this side and that, and they have the empathy. Because they know that what they have a saying, Armenians were the breakfast, we are the lunch. Because they have been suffering for a century as well. And so they know that they have to engage with the other peoples to get rid of this brutal regime. So that is why we need to be, as Armenians, that's why I'm trying to convince Armenians, we need to be in favor of engaging. This doesn't mean that we will forget Armenian genocide. Nobody is going to forget. But for 110 years, we are not engaging with Turkey. What we are doing, we are putting 95% of our energy to convince our governments to put pressure on Turkey. Yeah, isn't it right? Yeah. What happened at last? Mr. Biden just said, oh yeah, it is a genocide. What happened? Did this heal our wound? Did this stop Turkey or Azerbaijan committing other crimes against Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians? Unfortunately, no. So, this means our strategy doesn't work. This doesn't heal my grandmother's soul. This did not heal my grandmother. What is going to heal my grandmother's soul is Turkish parliament acknowledging the Armenian genocide. And how can this happen? Only a democratic Turkey can recognize the Armenian genocide. How this can happen? For people, it can start with people-to-people attraction. First, we need to open the border, engage with people, start to do trade, just benefiting from each other, create an interdependency, then understand each other. This is how it happened between Turkey and Greece. You know, between 1915 to 2023, 300 or 400,000 Greeks were massacred. Do you know that? 300 to 400. It can be called as a genocide, and it is a genocide, actually, especially at that Black Sea region. But Greece do not want to close the border. They do trade. People go from each other. Millions of tourists are going from each other, and they engage with each other, and they know that they have a similar culture. So this is what I'm offering. Maybe one day, if we engage, those biased thoughts will mitigate, and we will start to talk about past again. But in this dark era, when so many genocides are being committed, so many human rights crimes, unfortunately, in those good years, we couldn't just, with pressure, we could not convince Turkey to recognize genocide, because Turkey has the strategic autonomy, strategic importance. Turkey is the master of playing this balancing game. One day going to Moscow, the other day to Washington. So I guess our strategy was wrong. Of course, we ask for justice, and we will keep for asking. But only a democratic Turkey can recognize the genocide, and it might mean something. Even if Turkey with pressure recognizes the Armenian genocide, will it mean something for you? A president, let's say, under the pressure of whatever, saying, oh, okay, it was a genocide. I don't think it will mean real justice. But real justice means reconciliation processes. And it can only happen with wisdom. And wisdom can only happen in democratic atmospheres and habitats.
That's a very, very good reflection. Since Armenia's independence from Soviet Union, Armenia-Turkey normalization has been a very hot topic. And it seems like both sides are interested in normalizing relations, but nothing has changed since then. So in your opinion, what are the obstacles? To what extent does Azerbaijan control the foreign relations of Turkey with Armenia?
No, so many things changed now from 1990s. Yeah, Armenia won the war, yeah. But unfortunately, now we did not win the peace. Armenia had the upper hand after the war. It had cards, just like Mr. Trump said, you remember? You don't have cards, but we had cards. We could have been negotiated, and Father Aliyev was open to that. And it could have ended, I know from so many important people from those times, they are still alive. This could have ended with an autonomous Artsakh, under the international guarantees. It could have ended. But unfortunately, we said, oh, we have this land, and there is no reason to compromise. We were maximalists as Armenians. We were maximalists. Then there were hundreds of thousands of Azeris who had to flee from their land, and Azerbaijan did not have any kind of national identity, and Aliyev built a national identity over this. Aliyev said, oh, look, hundreds of thousands of Azeris came from those lands, and they said, look, they got your land, and I am going to create an army and take a revenge. And it was a petro state. And he steals from his people and bought some sophisticated weapons. I went to Armenia to warn Armenia, look, this war is coming. What are you doing? Either you need to be ready for the war or ready for the peace. But we were not ready for the peace, and we were not ready for the war. That is why we suffered this catastrophe. That's what I believe. So, we have, our policy is so much emotion, as Armenians, I mean, so much emotion. Yeah, we need to see the threats, but emotional policies do not see the threats and the opportunities. But when you have a state culture, or when you have a realistic policy, you see the threats and opportunities. So that's why in these 30 years, so many things changed, and unfortunately, we suffered another catastrophe. And that's another trauma for us. So this is why I believe, without any engagement, this hatred cycle always hits us back. And in this dark era, whoever is vulnerable is going to face new catastrophes. Now Armenia is at stake. How can we avoid this stake? My question is this: without engaging, we have zero chance. Zero chance. But if we open the border, have a lifeline, which Aliyev never wants. Whenever Erdogan says, I'm ready to open the border, let's say, after the Artsakh war, Erdogan said, oh, we did a mistake. I'm ready to open the border. I convinced them. And Mr. Biden, I went to talk with high-ranking officials. Erdogan was waiting for some kind of credit for that. And Mr. Biden didn't give him to it. Why? Because some Armenians told him not to open the border unless Turkey recognizes genocide or whatever. And who benefited from this? Aliyev. There is something wrong with this. Aliyev doesn't want this Turkish-Armenian border to open. And some Armenians don't want this Turkish-Armenian border to open. And something must be wrong with it. So this is why I'm saying we need to again evaluate our strategy. What is high on the bust? What is for the Armenians, in favor of Armenians, what is not? What strategy works for us? What strategy doesn't work for us? That's why I guess we need to evaluate this. If you want, I can continue with this question. But I guess the right strategy is to engage. And Erdogan is an opportunist leader. Everything is transactional for Erdogan. Everything. Turkish economy is vulnerable, still vulnerable. And Turkey can be constructive, opening the border, taking something from the West in return, or he can be in favor of another war, which is going to be the end of Armenia, and Azerbaijan is going to attack, and he will say, oh, we just established the Turkic corridor. We just united the Turkic corridor. He can be in favor of that as well, because he's an opportunist and he's transactional. So in this dark era, what should be the right strategy? That's what we need to think on it. And these weeks and months, or this year, will be crucial, will be decisive about Armenia's future.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
After this,
Just on that point?
up to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
But Turkey's official position is that its relationship with Armenia depends on Armenia's relationship with Azerbaijan.
It is not. As I said, everything is transactional for Erdogan. Now what happens? When Turkey sends a message to Mr. Biden, in these 4 years, at least 4 times, I witnessed that he sent this message because his economy was vulnerable. Now, when Biden said, oh, I don't want to engage with this because some Armenians don't want this. But whenever Erdogan was sincere, Aliyev saw this as a threat. What did he do? Lately, Erdogan was not happy with Aliyev. And he just said, I might open the border. Even I convinced them to open the border during the earthquake, but for a day. Then, 3 months before now, he just saw a threat. Aliyev just announced another investment plan to Turkey with Sokar, with $8 billion. Then Erdogan became silent. He said, oh, Armenia needs to change its constitution. Aliyev buys Erdogan's silence with money. But Erdogan is open to offers. If he sees something more from the West, to say, let's sit and I give you F-35s, you give me this, whatever, or trade deals or tariffs, Erdogan will be open to this. So if we are not open to this, but if we say this border should be closed, whatever, we should think about it. Is it in favor of Armenia? And anytime Israel-Iran war can break out, anytime. And Israel and Azerbaijan are allies, and Israel sees Azerbaijan as its garrison. What if a war erupts between Iran and Israel? In a day, I'm sure, Aliyev, Azerbaijan will attack, unfortunately. And nobody is going to lift their finger. Don't trust in USA or France or whatever. Unfortunately, we were fooled several times that, oh, there will be a savior coming from USA, France. It's not going to happen. So this is why I'm saying these weeks or months are very crucial, and anytime we can have an existential threat.
So you've answered this kind of a little bit, but in your opinion, can you elaborate more? What are the obstacles for normalizing relationship from kind of all perspectives between Armenia and Turkey?
The biggest obstacle is Aliyev. The biggest stumbling block is Aliyev. And unfortunately, Turkey was the elder brother and Azerbaijan was the little brother. Now, unfortunately, Turkey is the hostage of Baku. Because Aliyev is stealing from his people and investing in Ankara, and Azerbaijan has a payroll in Ankara. Payroll. Now, they have media organizations and they have a payroll throughout the bureaucracy. And whenever, I was the only Armenian person in Turkey who was opposing to Artsakh war. They lynched me with hundreds of media organizations, this and that, because they have this leverage. Unfortunately, we missed that. But in 2008, there was a prospect of that natural gas pipeline passing through Armenia. Unfortunately, some Armenians opposed that. This could have really be a turning point for Armenia, because as you know, if you create interdependency, those pipelines pass through Armenia or other lines as well, they become the crossroads, then you will have less risk of wars. And we could have created an interdependency between Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Turkey. But unfortunately, we could not do it. Now, what did Azerbaijan do? That pipeline went through Georgia, and Armenia is not a significant country for Turkey. It is only a bargaining chip. Because we are 2.5 million, it's not a big market, it's not a significant economy, and Aliyev is always investing in Turkey, and Azerbaijan really has huge leverage over it. So that's why I'm saying, if you engage, you create interdependency and you create leverage. But if you don't engage, you have no importance. You do have zero cuts. Just like Turkey and Greece, there were so many escalations between Turkey and Greece. Why did we did not see any war? Why? Because Turks and Greeks love each other? No. It's all about interdependency. Because millions of Turkish people and Greek people are benefiting from tourism. If that war erupts, that tourism is going to end, both sides are going to lose. Whenever they see tension, they go to their governments, both sides, please don't start any war. All of us are going to lose. So this is why I'm saying, if you have interdependency and leverage, there is less risk of a war. You mitigate the risk.
So in your opinion, what concrete steps Armenia and Turkey can take to begin normalization, create that interdependency?
Actually, what steps can be taken? First of all, if you talk about the governments, of course, this border has to be, you have to open this border. But afterwards, especially these border cities, let's say, we talk about Gümri and Kars. Do you know those cities? No. Some of you might know Gümri, but it is a sister city, Kars. They have the same, almost they are the similar cities, and they have the same culture, even same food, same dances, folklore is going on in those. I guess if you open this border, and let's say we suffered the genocide, and let's say border cities have the Kurdish majority, and they really suffered so many human rights violations. They have the empathy between each other and they will benefit from this. First, I guess, before the governments, of course, governments will take this step, but before the governments, people should really work on these geo-economic, geopolitical and cultural issues. And if I'm working on this, let's say, if we open this border, Turkey's eastern part is so much underdeveloped. They are so much poor. They will benefit from this. And Gümrü is poor as well. They will benefit from this. And at least Armenian economy is going to double, maybe triple in 5 to 10 years. And it's going to create a stronger economy, and which is going to create a stronger army, which will have a deterrence capacity. If you don't have a stronger economy, you won't have a strong army, and you won't have, as you know, a deterrence capacity. So this is the equation that I'm offering. If we just believe in engaging, Azerbaijan only has oil and gas, which is going to be less significant, but we have the brains, we have a deep culture, we have the tourism capacity, service economy, IT sector, and other sectors, which is going to boom, but which needs security. So little Armenians are investing in Armenia. Why? Why? Because of security threats. They know that Armenia might not have a future. But if we mitigate those security threats, more people are going to invest in Armenia, more people will want to live. In 1990s, we were 3 million. We could have been 6 million now. We are 2.5 million. Why? So many people left Armenia. Why? Because they don't see their future. Because they know that there might be threats for Armenia. But if we mitigate those threats, more people will want to live in Armenia. Because it's a livable country. It's a beautiful country, and with open borders, with engaging with other neighbors, because it is our destiny. No, you cannot take Armenia to next to Georgia or whatever, Maryland or whatever other countries. It is our destiny to live with Turks and Azeris, and it is in our favor. If now Armenia, Aliyev needs an enemy, but we don't need an enemy. And Azeris are not our enemies. Our enemy is an ideology, unfortunately, a genocidal ideology. But we need to remember that we used to coexist with Azeris and Kurds. In Sushi, we used to, only 35 years ago, we used to coexist. We should be in favor of this, which is going to be in our favor. But Azerbaijan needs an enemy. That's why they don't want peace, and they do everything. They will do everything to just get rid of those. He will do everything to not to sign that deal. I'm sure about it. That's why we should be in favor of these openings and engagements.
I want to shift topics a little bit. In recent weeks, we've seen political protests explode in Turkey in response to the arrest of Istanbul's Mayor Ekrem Imamoglu. How do you anticipate things to change after this?
It has been 25 years now. Erdogan has been ruling Turkey for 23 years, and in his first 10 years, he behaved like a democrat. He just started the European Union process because the army was mostly ruling Turkey. Then there was a coup d'etat in 2016, and he saw this as a God's gift, and he just dismissed the judges, just fired the judges and hired the loyalist judges, and he just demolished all the media and all the institutions. And I was a member of the Turkish Parliament. Parliament had some kind of a power, but unfortunately now Parliament has almost zero power against Erdogan rule. So I believe these protests are very important, but I'm sure Erdogan calculated before jailing Erdogan, because Erdogan knows that Imamoglu can win this election. That's why maybe he jailed Selahattin Demirtas, my co-chair, 8.5 years ago, and because he knew that he has influence over people, and now he knew that Imamoglu can win this election. That's why he jailed, and he will not release him, free him. I'm sure. When he frees him, it will be the end of Erdogan. So he dared to jail Imamoglu. Why? Do you know? Because of Trump effect. He could not have dared to do it. And because he knew that Trump administration is going to just say this is Turkey's internal affairs. We cannot say anything about it. Biden was only saying, oh, we have concerns, and sometimes deep concerns about human rights violations. That was the only difference, unfortunately, doing nothing because Turkey has a strategic importance. Now, Mr. Trump's administration just said, this is the Turkey's internal affairs, because they look everything in transactional prism. Only transactional. That's Trump says, oh, Turkey has strategic importance, and he likes strong men, and I will do business with Erdogan, so I will turn a blind eye on whatever he does. This is the reality. And whenever in the world there is no liberal democracy, Turkey gets worse than that, unfortunately. We dreamt of Turkey to be a small USA. Now USA is becoming a big Turkey, unfortunately. So when the reality is this, who is going to shame Erdogan for jailing his rival? So this is the reality. So I fully respect people's struggle in Turkey. And there is struggle, as you know, there is hope. But I'm not sure if it is going to go anywhere without an international support.
I guess this will be our last question before we open for Q&A. How have you been spending your time since living with Turkish politics? What have you been working on at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Washington, D.C.?
No, I never wanted to leave my country, never. But so many friends. I didn't want to run again to the Turkish parliament because it didn't mean anything. I was repeating myself. I was talking about the Armenian genocide. They were lynching me. Words doesn't matter anymore in Turkey, unfortunately. So I didn't want to repeat myself. I didn't want to run again. But there were two options: either to be assassinated. There were so many assassination attempts during my, when I was in the parliament. I am lucky to be alive. And second option is to be jailed, of course. And so many of my friends convinced me to leave my country to be more beneficial from the United States. That's why I'm in DC now. I tried to convince, as I said, Biden administration to do more about Turkish, Armenia, Azerbaijan reconciliation processes. Unfortunately, I did my best. Of course, I'm always trying to be in touch with U.S. officials, Congress, and other think tanks as well. So I'm happy to be here, but I'm so sorry for my country. I left my country with a defeat because I tried to, with my friends, make Turkey as a democracy because I knew that only a democratic Turkey can recognize the Armenian genocide, and only a democratic Turkey can really make good ties with its neighbors. But now from here, I'm trying to convince U.S. administration to play a constructive role about Turkish-Armenian reconciliation process. And I need your support about this, because I'm not a US citizen, but most of you are. If you become in favor of these kind of reconciliation processes, your administration is going to be in favor of it as well. But this doesn't mean that some of you might see this as a weakness. No, peace comes through strength. If you have cards, if you play your cards cleverly, peace comes. Of course, we have to have one hand squeezed. This requires unity. There is no unity, unfortunately, between Armenians and diaspora Armenians. This is a weakness for us. We need to unite and ready to hit back. When power just attacks us, just to protect our country. And on the other hand, we need to extend one hand. But we don't have this strategy, unfortunately. This is what I'm trying to do.
All right, thank you so much. Let's open it up to questions from you guys.
Yeah, I have a question for you. So, do you see
Your name is?
Hello?
Do
Do you see Turkey's support with Azerbaijan as a continuation of genocide that happened in Artsakh, displacing 120,000 Armenians? Do you see that as a
Of course, I always said this is another genocide that we are suffering, and Turkey unfortunately contributed to that genocide. And but this was coming. territorial integrity was a sacrosanct, let's say, 10 years ago, as you know, because Azerbaijan was criticizing us about invading their territory, as you know. It was a sacrosanct. This was coming, no. As you know, an autocrat like Aliyev, which in the democracy league, even below North Korea, what would you expect from him? He needs an enemy. All autocrats need enemies. And he had an enemy. And he just created an army. We were only watching. I just talked with Artsakh officials as well. I said, look, they have drones. What do you have? They said, we have anti-drones. I said, no, you don't have that. They have tanks. They have sophisticated weapons. They are training their army. No, and they have territorial demands. And those days, we were electing a president for Artsakh. No, when you have cards, of course, when you are strong, I'm not in favor of whatever Israel does, of course. But they say, if they hit us once, we hit them 1,000 times. But we were not strong. You either need to be strong to support your rights, or else and clever. We were not strong, and unfortunately we were not clever. And that is what an autocrat does, unfortunately. We have to take lessons out of our sufferings. Unfortunately, we did not get any lesson out of that suffering. Now, Armenia is at stake, and we are not united. This is a big, big weakness. And we don't have a strategy. This is a big, big weakness. And our enemies are eyeing us. When Mr. Trump is saying, oh, I can get Panama, I can get Greenland, even I can make Canada as the 51st state. What would you expect from autocrat to do? He has demands. He has a map saying that Syunik is Zengezur is mine. It is a Western Azerbaijan. When that war erupts, anytime, he can attack and to unite the Turkish world. He has this kind of agenda. How can we deter this? This is the question. If you don't learn from your history, you always suffer the same, and you live in that victim mood. You always wait for the next catastrophe coming and blame the others. We always do that. We always blame the others. What about us? What are we doing? We need to just first, because our grandparents would ask the same thing from us. I'm sure my grandmother Siranush, if I asked her, she was a very clever woman. If I asked her, should I put my energy to a genocide which has happened against you, your parents, or should I just deter a coming catastrophe? She would have said, first deter the coming catastrophe. If you can stop the coming catastrophe, then you might have some then it might cause some rise. This is the equation, unfortunately, we are not always forgetting. So we need to look at ourselves. Where did we do wrong to suffer this latest catastrophe? And what should we do to deter the coming catastrophe?
Wasn't that lesson learned when we removed Sultan Ahmed from the seat and engaged during that era, and the reform was genocide as a result of that?
Yeah, it might be, but you know.
So do you not fear that engagement again with Turkey? That they claimed as a non-democratic state to engage with them in 2025?
Of course, and this is the dilemma that Kurds have now. Now, there are protests going on in Turkey, you know. And the secular ones say, oh, Kurds need to be with us. But they are somehow nationalists. We just turned a blind eye on it. Of course, we wanted to get rid of autonomy. That's what the Sultan, who was an autocrat. But we made a coalition with Italian Hrach party, who committed the Armenian Genocide. So that is why I'm saying, of course, there were not big options for that time. But you need to be strong and or clever, and you need to have cards. And when that World War broke out, they committed the genocide. Now we are just hearing the footsteps of the Third World War. Anytime Israel, Iran, Ukraine, Russia, so many things are going on there. And that region is very tumultuous. Anytime a big war can erupt, and Aliyev has the upper hand, and he can benefit from it. That is why he is dragging his feet. So we need a lifeline. That's why I'm saying. That's why I'm urging. We need to. Every Armenian needs to do everything in his or her power to contribute to a strong Armenian dream, first of all, and second of all, because you are US citizens, you need to put pressure on US administration to deter this. Mr. Trump has the capacity to do it. He can just tweet saying that Aliyev, if you do it, you will face these sanctions, whatever. He doesn't do it. Why? Because Aliyev is friends with Israel. He will never do it. And we are not asking for Trump to do it. We are not asking Trump to broker a peace. We are only asking Trump to sanction Azerbaijan and sanction Turkey, which will never ever happen. It is an unrealistic demand, because Azerbaijan is a friend with Israel and Turkey has a strategic importance. But if we could have asked, Mr. Trump, Armenia has an existential threat. Please put your personal weight on it and broker this peace. He might have done this. This is I guess, the clever strategy. That's what I'm hoping.
So I guess in your ideal timeline, is it Turkey reforms and becomes more democratic as a state, or is it now engage and then hopefully?
Exactly, because you are absolutely right. No, but Abdullah Öcalan has just extended a hand to Turkish state. Why do you know? Because Abdullah Öcalan loves Turkish state, Erdogan? No, because our Turkish army is at the border, ready to just demolish the Kurdish neighborhoods at the border, Syrian border. That's why he lowered the bar, just extended a hand to buy some time. In 5 to 10 years, Turkey might turn to a democracy. And if we establish peace, I'm sure it will be the end of Aliyev. It will be the start of that end of Aliyev, because his people will say, oh, Armenia is getting richer, and we are poor. Why? They will ask for it, and they will get rid of the autocracy. And maybe Azerbaijan will be a democracy in 5 to 10 years or whatever, and we will engage better, and Turkey will turn to a democracy. But if we lose Armenia, who is going to engage? People were fighting for Artsakh, right? I was fighting as well. Who is going to fight for Artsakh? There is nobody in Artsakh. No Armenian, zero. If we could have had that autonomy, maybe Azerbaijan could have turned to a democracy in 10 years, 20 years, and we could have more rights. So this is where starts the cleverness and that, because strength comes from strategy. If you don't have a strategy, viable, plausible strategy, then you are weak. You have to read the room. You have to read the road. We are not doing it.
So your recommendation would it be adding genocide recognition as a stipulation to opening borders?
No, not at all. No, genocide is a reality for us, and it will never change. But it is not up to Turks to recognize it or not. It is their problem. It's not our problem. If they don't recognize, they will just continue that crime. But it is not the fault of the new generation, after fourth generation. They know nothing about it. I showed that pictures in the Turkish parliament. Zero parliamentarians knew that there was Armenian parliamentarians in Ottoman parliament. Zero. I just delivered books telling them, look, this happened. They were asking for this. They were not traitors. They wanted a democratic Ottoman Empire. They know zero things. As Jesus Christ said, Father, they know nothing about it. So maybe this is our destiny to teach them with engaging, with extending a hand, but at the same time, strengthening our power. That should be our goal.
Also, a fundamental belief that you forgive after someone repents. So.
No, I don't. I never forgive. But this generation is not responsible to do so. But when they deny, of course they will contribute to that denial. But they know nothing about it. In the textbooks, it says Armenians were traitors and we sent them. But now most of the Turks know that something bad has happened, but they are not ready to call it genocide because Turkish state gives them that threat that Armenians might come back and take that territory from you back. So we can tell them that we are not asking that territory from you. We are asking maybe some compensation from the state. We can explain it that way. We can find a way. But this requires a conversation, as you know. If you have zero conversation, you cannot convince people. And only a Garo Paylan or something cannot do it. You all need to, because your ancestors are from Turkey, from Kars, from Marash. We have the responsibility to make those lands a better place, to livable place. And it requires, of course, engagement, people to do attraction.
Thank you, Mr. Paylan. Thank you, Uncle Jen. We have a little more questions here.
I like the point you made, just to Harab's question. My name is Manu. And we sent busloads in 1993 after the first World Trade Center bombing to Washington because that was the blockade. And some of our patriots that were sitting out on the lawns where our signs were, and ones that were American citizens before went to meet their legislators. Taking a break was the State Department researchers. "You are Armenian," they said to the group waiting out the sign. Says, "We know what's going on in Azerbaijan right now. And if you chose to do so, you can go all the way to Baku." And we chose not to. That was one question. The other thing was my last moment just before Hrach was assassinated. I was with him. There was somebody from the Basque community, the Spanish, and I had a theory because I was touring in Nebraska. I ran into the Basque community, and so much of what they sounded like and felt like was Armenian. And I said then that I think there's a DNA connection with the Basque and the Armenians. And now they're saying there is. What if we swab Irving? You're smiling, and he finds out that he's part Armenian. There's the two questions.
You know what? I believe, sometimes, let's say, you fight with somebody, but you can think of who made us enemies, who just make us fight. I believe Russia always had the hegemony in the South Caucasus. And in the 1990s, there was a Russian finger. And in all the former Soviet countries, there are some disputes between countries. And Russia, Soviet Union, left some disputes between the states. And one dispute was the Ukrainian territories. Of course, now they are attacking there. And between the states, they left some disputes now. Artsakh to Azerbaijan, Syunik to Armenia, and the other Kyrgyzstan, this part. And there are always problems, and there is a bigger brother there who is just whistling the blow to fight and whistling the blow to stop the fight. I guess there was some kind of a thing there. Of course, we had big problems. There were massacres in Syunik and Baku, and fights, wars started, so many human rights violations. But at some point, as you said, we could have done maybe more. But some power said, no, this is it. In the 2020 Artsakh war, Aliyev could have gotten Syunik. Why did he stop? He had the power to get Syunik. Because some power said, no, this is as much as you can get. Even he could have gotten in this, stipulation that moment, but he stopped. Some power said, no, this is it. This is it for now. But then they turned a blind eye on Artsakh. Why? Russia. Because Russia was, just buying its oil and gas over Azerbaijan. All states, there is no friends and foes between in international affairs. That's what I learned. You can be a friend today, and in some days you can be an enemy. Look, Mr. Biden was endorsing Ukraine. Now Mr. Trump said, "Oh, Putin is great." No, it's changed because U.S. interests changed. So this is what I mean. So I believe we should really look the bigger picture, because South Caucasus is a very tiny part of the world, and historically for 1,000 years, Arabs occupied, Turks occupied, Byzantines, Romans occupied, then again Iranians came, then Russians came. Always we were under occupation. Why? Because we don't have a regional identity. Georgians, Azeris, and Armenians couldn't come together. They made fight with each other. That's like in 1920. We had Azeris, Georgians, and Armenians had a state after the catastrophe. Yeah, but what did we do? First we had a federation, then we started to fight with each other. Oh, that is mine, this is yours. And Bolsheviks came and took everything over. This is what we need to see. You can have some more land, let's say. Oh, this is mine, this is yours, whatever. You need to have you can have the reason, but a big power can come and take everything over. This is the lesson we need to learn, I guess, from this. For this, we need to understand that we are not that much strong, and what we can be.
There are avenues. when you talk about land and so on, I am not American Armenian expat. We're the only two Armenians that met with the Azeris and the Georgians in Tbilisi. What did we talk about? We talked about the flower and the flower. Because if there was a fire, there's no differentiation because of the borders. And there's these kinds of openings that we have.
And the lesson we need to learn from this is Armenia needs to have a strategic autonomy as well. Some Armenians are in favor of European Union. Some Armenians are in favor of Russia or whatever. I guess we don't have that opportunity. We need to have a strategic autonomy. We need to have good relations with Russia. We need to have good relations with our neighbors. But we should not only rely on, oh, USA is going to come and save us, or France is helping us. We like France. But how they are helping, why they are helping, we need to think about it. Because Turks and Russians are hurting France in Africa, let's say, African countries, their interests. And they want to hurt Russia in the Russian backyard. Of course, there are Armenians there, or France has a policy about endorsing Armenia, but it's not about love and hate. It's all about 90% about interests. Maybe 5% might mean, oh, Armenia is a Christian state, we might care about it. I'm sure as long as Israel cares about Azerbaijan, unfortunately USA will not even lift its finger when US Armenians' position is this, just waiting, seeing what's going to happen, or being against only seeing Turks and Azeris as enemies. Our borders should be closed. Now, US is not going to lift its finger.
Going back to Echevit's time and then Gulen in the middle and then current Erdogan, the so-called democratic state, in your opinion, I've got one more thing to ask and then ask you to respond. When do you think, I know you don't have to go, but when do you think realistically, put aside Azerbaijan, put aside Armenia, when do you think that this democratic, couple of coups happened, attempts happened, number one. Number two, with Pashinyan, we have not discussed Pashinyan today. What's your personal take, opinion, and also most recent, Trump's cutting back all these NGOs, and is there turmoil in that corrupt government? Or, I don't want to say corrupt, we've had a number of corrupt governments. We talked about a strong economy, supporting back and forth import-exports, but how are we going to support that if we don't have that bond?
Yeah. Now, as you know, military had the biggest power in Turkish democracy, or whatever we call it, for decades. When Erdogan got the power, also the conservatives were repressed, as you know. When there was a Gülenist movement, and Erdogan's base were under the pressure of the army. They didn't want the headscarf, whatever. They were under repression, and I was with them. It was a human rights violation, of course. But Erdogan just turned his face to European Union to get rid of the status quo, of course. But of course, there were reforms. As an opportunist, Erdogan was sincere about this. Of course, he cared about his power, but he was benefiting from European Union. Let's say trade with European Union was great, and Erdogan was welcomed in the European capitals. And his base was voting for him just because the economy was booming. But then Sarkozy and Merkel changed their spokes. Sarkozy and Merkel said, "Oh, we don't want Turkey because they are Muslim." And Erdogan started to say, "Oh, if you don't want me, I don't want you as well." He turned his face to Baku. Baku just sending money, and to Moscow. Moscow sending money to Arab countries. And maybe if you do trade with the country, you look like that country. If you benefit from that country, you become the member of that party, unfortunately. And Turkish democracy started to deteriorate. And that power struggle between Gülenists and Erdogan, of course, poisoned Turkish democracy. So this was the reason. And unfortunately, in those years, we had a window of opportunity. In 2008, the football diplomacy. But unfortunately, it was a great window of opportunity, but we missed that as well. About Mr. Pashinyan, he is an elected prime minister, that's it. He is an elected prime minister. and people voted in favor of him, and he's governing Armenia until next year. Next year, Armenians might choose somebody else. He offered an agenda once. Then the war happened. Opposition asked for a snap election. It happened, and those people voted in his favor again. So, and he offered a peace agenda, and opposition just offered a revenge agenda. And Armenian people were glad to see that we don't have the power to have the revenge at all. So they voted for the peace agenda. That's it. Of course, like every politician, Mr. Pashinyan makes some mistakes. You know, I'm sometimes saying, if I was ruling Armenia, I could have done this or that, but it's so normal. So I'm happy to see that Armenia is a democracy. It's the only democracy in that region, surrounded by autocracies, and our only soft power is that democracy. And I'm hearing sometimes, that there are, which force we will change power. No, it's not. Of course, in democracies you can protest, but next year there will be elections, and people, if somebody else offers a better agenda, I mean, people will be in favor.
Well, he has a lot of people under his payroll, we know that, and Mr. Pashinyan, and he controls, he's a dictator, in my opinion. I know he's an elected official, and elections are, here and there. On the conversation of weakened Turkish commerce, let's say, let's look at Cyprus, what Ecevit days, right? And, it's not a country to be trusted, and the compromise between...
You cannot trust any country at all.
Of course, right? I understand. You're a politician,
No,
ex-politician.
you cannot trust any politician, including myself.
I understand.
Don't
That's
trust
what
any
he said.
politician. No, any politician can change the. No, I trust in myself, but for for the fate of Armenia or Armenians, I can also change my strategy. I'm in favor of this, but tomorrow I can be in favor of something else if I see that I am lost. It is in favor of Armenians.
And I wish that Pashinyan had that ability. I think that he's showing nothing but nothing but weakness. And once you show weakness, as you said before, you have the power and you have the dialogue, right? Once you show that weakness, guess what? In Arabic they say kharuj, you're like a sheep, right? So, I mean, I have a problem with that. And I think that a lot of the people...
But strength comes from unity.
I'm sorry?
Strength comes from unity.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have
But
a...
but this is the problem. Some people hate Trump. Some people love Trump. We know. US is polarized. But can somebody call an assassination attempt against Trump in this country? What happens? I don't think so. It's not going to end good, I guess, to ask for Trump to be assassinated. He's an elected official. He does good things and bad things for some people. He can be criticized and protested. So I believe democracy is all about, of course, to elect somebody, and there are institutions who check and balance you if you have those institutions, and the right to protest. So we need to contribute to that democracy. And of course there were some compromises, but the reality is we were. Everybody told us that until the 2020 war, we were strong. If they attack, we will go until Pakistan. Everybody told this lie. Only maybe some Armenians told this like me, trying to warn Armenian nation that we are not that strong. So when you are weak and when you lose a war, unfortunately you compromise. This is what happened to Ottoman Empire. Even they compromised. They still regret it. They lost so many things. When you lose a war, you compromise to save the remaining things that you have. But when you get stronger, you can have bigger demands. Just like Trump is having. I'm not in favor of that. He says I can get even Greenland or Panama, whatever. What makes him say that? His power, or Putin saying that Ukraine belongs to Russia. To have that kind of an agenda, you need to have strength. Strength comes from somehow unity.
All three you mentioned, Putin, Trump, and Pashinyan are dictators. That's why I think. And I don't see anything democratic in our
No, but of course, there are some levels about it. I wouldn't call it that way. Of course, you might see some hypocritical tendencies, but I cannot call Mr. Pashinyan.
Thank you for your questions. I think we can take one last question, and then I guess two more questions.
Okay. Why has Aliyev allowed this peace treaty with Armenia to get as far as it has? And is it part of Erdogan's plan to leave this peace treaty on the table here?
No. Actually, Aliyev was in favor of this peace, actually, 2 years ago. And he thought that because the global order was somehow liberal, and he wanted to elevate his image. He wanted to win the peace and elevate his image to the world stage. That's like MBS, Saudi Arabia, King. Of course, it's going to be a petro state, but he wanted to elevate his image, and that is why he wanted to host COP. You know that he hosted COP, the international organization. But the world order was changing, and nobody was giving him any credit. Everybody was calling him dictator, whatever, and Putin was offering him something. West was offering him zero things, and Putin was offering him things in cash, and now West was offering things for wake and for the future. As an autocrat, if I was in his shoes, I would prefer the Russian way. And he preferred to stay there, and he started to become against this and started to find pretexts about this. Oh, Armenia needs to change its constitution. This was not a condition. He wanted this pretext. Why? Because he said the world order is changing. Autocrats are winning everything, and when United States is just saying, I can get Panama and Greenland, why not me? Why not me? This is the reality, unfortunately. Because I know this playbook very well from Turkey. All these autocrats follow this playbook, and unfortunately, in this country somehow this playbook is not now implemented. So that is why he was in favor of peace when he thought that peace would be in his favor to elevate his image. Now he's not in favor of peace, unfortunately. Then we should think, how can we convince him to sign this peace? But unfortunately, we are not in favor of this peace. What is the solution then? Aliyev is not in favor of this peace, and some Armenians are not in favor of this. One of these has to be wrong. Which one is wrong? We need to answer this question.
Sorry, I think there was another question.
No, but none of I guess all men talk. So you should talk more.
Perfect, thank you. I guess I'm just a little confused, so if you could offer some clarity. I feel like some of the things you were saying seem to kind of contradict each other. On one hand, you say that you recognize that what happened to the Armenians in Artsakh is genocide, and then on the other, you say that recognition of the Armenian Genocide in 1915 should not be a priority, like it's not important right now.
I didn't say that.
Well, you said that we shouldn't pursue that in the well, I think also previously you said 95% of our energy should go into
Future.
The future. So I mean, yeah, that's kind of I think the same as saying it's insignificant, relatively speaking. So that seems to be a contradiction to me. And then the second thing is you say that it's important to have dialogue with an autocratic state, Turkey, which is not democratic in your words. And then at the same time, you also fled assassination attempts, and you also named yourself and Hrach as the two people that have tried to engage in that dialogue in Turkey, and yet Hrach was assassinated. So I guess my question is how.
What is your solution?
I just don't think that I see eye to eye with dialogue being the number one.
What is your solution?
I guess not forgetting genocide recognition would be a starter for me.
Okay, I never offer.
I'm also not a
Because,
diplomat.
I dedicated my life for this, as you know. I don't want to have to prove myself, but I dedicated my life for the recognition of Armenian Genocide, and I knew that only if Turkish government or Turkish parliament recognizes Armenian genocide are voluntarily here. Because when I say just recognize the Armenian genocide, which we put 95% of our energy. This did not stop for us to suffer the Artsakh. No, this is the reality. This is the harsh reality, unfortunately. And what is your name? Sosa. We are living in that geography. And this is our destiny, unfortunately. Fortunate or unfortunate, this is our destiny to live in that geography. If you are living in a home, let's say, surrounded by liberals or democrats, I guess you will feel safe, very true. But if you are living in a neighborhood, surrounded by mafia leaders or whatever, I don't think you will feel safe. What is your solution? What would be your solution? Just if you engage with people, let's say, or either try to be strong. If you are not strong, you need to be clever. That's my offer. And second of all, I never offer to forget genocide. We will never forget, and we will commemorate it on this month again, on April 24th. But it belongs to us. It is not up to Turks if they recognize it or not. It will not end in us if they recognize it or not. If they don't recognize it, we will not just stop this fight. If they don't, we will not stop it as well. It belongs to us. It is not up to Turks. But what I offer to Turks is, if you recognize this genocide, the world is not going to, this new generation, just blame the new generation. Because they just convinced 3 generations that Armenians were traitors. That's what we said them. But if we explain them the reality, that's what I try to do, that's what Granting tried to do. Now, the majority of the Turks know that something bad has happened, but they are not ready to call it genocide. There was a window of opportunity in 2015. It could have happened. We just commemorated Armenian genocide at the Taksim Square. Do you know Istanbul? I don't know. Taksim Square with thousands of people. This was the reality. But we didn't give any credit to people in Turkey who are just making this fight. That is why I'm telling you. With engaging, we have a chance. Without engagement, we have 0 chance. With peace process, we might have 20% of a chance, 30% of a chance. But without a peace process, Armenia has 0% of a chance. There might be an Armenia under Turkish occupation or Russian occupation, just like it happened in 1920. That's what I'm saying. We need to check our strategy, which can be a better strategy. Putting 94% of our energy into the future is not a wrong strategy. Why? Because if you don't have a strategy, you will never find justice in the past. That is the harsh reality, unfortunately. This doesn't mean that we will not commemorate, we will forget. No. 5% is enough to commemorate and to just try to heal our ancestors' suffering.
I have multiple parts to the questions. And so, it's genuinely difficult for me to believe that normalization can happen between Armenia and Turkey. And this is not from a hostile perspective on the Armenians front. It is truly from a hostile perspective on the Turkish front. You said in this discussion multiple times that in Turkish history books, there's that one sentence of Armenians are traitors. And that ideology has been bred into the Turkish mindset for over 100 years. I want to say even over 200 years. And there's multiple instances of them supposedly advocating for normalization when in reality they were planning for hostility again. In 2001, supposedly the Turkish Armenian Reconciliation Commission was launched. This was through multiple parties, they met in Geneva. In the same time, the Altay operation that was formed by the Turkish Armed Forces was hatched in 2001. And in 2019, when it was leaked out to the public, it was stated by the Turkish military that it was still an active plan. So there's one instance there. I'm sorry.
No,
there's one instance there.
Please come to I understood your question. You are biased, but what is your solution? I'm asking.
My solution is I can't work with someone who is willing to work with
I know, but
willing to work with
what
me.
What is your solution? Armenia is at stake. What is your solution?
My solution would not be to bend over to.
No. What is your solution?
is to
Fight.
either continue our struggle, continue our fight, and fight for justice through these other nations. Because
Who cares about
by strengthening ourselves and by establishing the better connections with other nations. You said in this discussion that what did getting genocide recognized by all of these other countries do for Armenia? Well, it put it on a global platform because before no country recognized it, and therefore no other country knew about
I
it.
have full respect about it. I have full respect about this, but I only underline this did not stop the Artsakh genocide. I have, of course, I struggled for this, for genocide recognition. I dedicated my life, but only I just mentioned this does not stop the Artsakh genocide. This is the harsh reality.
Okay. And only after the handover of Artsakh is Turkey actively participating in these meetings and trying to approach normalization. So why is it that after all of these years, they weren't willing to do work with the Armenians, but after Artsakh was handed over, now suddenly they're willing to do work?
Let me tell you about this, how Orthodox mindset is. Erdogan always plays for two horses. Let's say peace agenda, war agenda. Whichever works, Erdogan wins. It is just like maybe Trump is somebody like this. You know, he might one day say this or the other day this. Whichever works, he says, oh, this wrong. My horse won. After the 2020 war, Turkey was expecting leverage over South Caucasus. But who brokered the peace? Russians. And Russia was in Artsakh. And Turkey was very upset with this, with Baku itself. That is why I know very well. I told them Turkey will be one of the losers of this war, and they saw it. That is why they started this normalization process. And they sent messages to Washington DC several times that we are ready to open this border. And Aliyev was ready to start a peace process, whatever. And Turkey would play a constructive role. But as you are now, we are biased. Of course, we have all the right to be biased. But Armenia was and still is at stake. How are we going to deter this? This is the main problem. Surrounded by autocracies and world order have changed. And the stakes are even higher. You know what? Artsakh really hurt us, all of us, terribly. All of us. But Armenia is going to hurt us even more. Because it is the last piece of land that we have. It's not about Pashinyan. Pashinyan is only an elected prime minister. I don't care about him or whoever is elected. I care about Armenia. He's only an elected prime minister. And history is not going to write, oh, Pashinyan did this, or Bedros did that, Abov did this, Garo did this, or Sosa did this. No, history is not going to write. History is going to write what we did not do when Armenia is at stake. This is the harsh reality. So how are we going to deter the coming catastrophe? That is. Of course, I know about Turkey, but Turkey is a transactional country, has always been, and it always believes in balancing acts. It always plays for two options. Whatever works in its favor, they are there. As I said, Erdogan can be in favor of Azeri aggression, saying that, oh, we united the Turkish war. And Erdogan can be in favor of opening the border and playing a constructive role about Turkish Armenia. With Trump convinces, if the Trump convinces it, he will do it. We will see. Which one you prefer? That's my question. I prefer Mr. Trump to convince Erdogan to open the border and play a constructive role, convince Aliyev to sign that deal. That is going to save Armenia, and that is going to double Armenian economy in 5 years. And we will have more taxes, and we will create an army which has a deterrence capacity, because our army is not modern, and which will have a deterrence capacity. I prefer this agenda. Which agenda do you prefer? Without engaging, without just having a strategic, thinking, with only thinking with our emotions, of course, which, of course, I'm an emotion. I'm a romantic politician. I'm a Barda, and But I know the reality. I have to deal with the coming catastrophe. I have to deter the coming catastrophe to make my country great. Whatever, for Armenia great, for make Turkey, because Turkish nationalists are using my identity as an enemy. I want to show them that we are not your enemies. We want to engage with you. We want to start trade with you. We want more tourists to come to Turkey and Armenia, which will benefit both sides. And we will see that Kurds are not our enemies at our border. They suffer as well. They want to engage with Armenians. Why shouldn't we? This is my question. We should be in favor. We should be in favor of engagement. No engagement always hit us back. This hatred cycle always hit Armenians back, and it will hit back unfortunately.
Can I ask what protected Syunik
It's
in the
up to-
last? Can I ask what protected Syunik, in your opinion, from not being attacked following losing Artsakh?
Excuse me?
Can I ask what you believe protected Syunik? Is it because Armenia's current borders are nationally, globally recognized? Is that why you believe that Syunik was protected in that time frame? Or?
Yeah, of course.
So,
Because territorial integrity was a sacrosanct in those times. Now it is no longer. Because when Mr. Trump is talking about whatever taking territory by force, Aliyev will say, why shouldn't? Who is going to shame Aliyev under these circumstances? This is my question.
so is that
And I'm sure if that they attack, Russians are going to control that. This is going to be a Russian corridor, and Armenia will be a satellite of Russia. It's going to be the Belarus in the South Caucasus. It is a catastrophe for me. It will be a catastrophe for me. I don't know you, but it's going to be a catastrophe for all of us. And none of the countries make the same mistakes twice. We make the same mistake. We will make the same mistake twice, unfortunately. Being a Russian orbit again, satellite again, and being a Belarus like the South Caucasus, which is going to feel its citizens' hatred against Turks and Azeris, which Turks and Azeris will benefit from. This is a big problem for me.
Thank you, Mr. Paylan. Since we're a little bit running out of time, I want to have one last question, like not a student question, so just one last question from the student, and then we can take pictures and I guess a little bit of informal communication.
Hello, sir. Thank you for being here. My name is Milad, and I'm pursuing economics here at Brown. And given your background in economics, I wanted to ask you, if Turkey and Armenia were to normalize and open borders, do you think there's a risk that Armenia could fall into economic dependency on Turkey? And if you were to structure such relations, how would you go ahead with that to make sure the sovereignty of Armenia?
Of course. Now Armenian economy is $25 billion. That's all. It was $12 billion 25 years ago. Now it's $25 billion. $25 billion is a peanut for the world, unfortunately. And Armenia is so much dependent on Russia. Let's say 99% of Armenian grain is coming from Russia. Russia can anytime just starve Armenia. 80% of gas is coming from Russia, and so many other dependencies. I believe this much of a dependence to any country, even if it was United States, I wouldn't be in favor. Every country needs to diversify its resources, energy resources and other resources. This requires better relations with other nations. That's why I'm open. If you open this border, Turkish border, some of the grain will come from Turkey. If we can establish a peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan, some of the energy will come from Azerbaijan. And in return, we are going to sell them services. Because as you know, oil is less than. But if you create an IT company, it can create billions of dollars and it can create hundreds of thousands of jobs. That is our strength. That is why I'm saying, no, let me give you an example. In 1990s, Turkish nationalists, hardline nationalists, were not in favor of this customs union with the EU. And they were using the same sentence, saying that if we open this border, Turkey will be flooded by European goods and Turkish economy will collapse. We were just supporting the other way because we knew that if Turkey engages with EU, Turkey will have the European standards, not only economic standards, democratic standards as well, and Turkish economy will boost. And we were. Turkey were only selling $10 billion goods to Europe. Now Turkey is selling $150 billion. in 30 years, 15 times bigger. And Turkish economy is maybe 10 times bigger. And Turkish standards, of course, democracy standards were in that way, but we lost it, unfortunately. But Turkey is producing European Union goods with European Union standards. And Turkey can sell all over the world. That's one major Europe. And if you open this border, you will see Armenian economy will double in 5 years. That is Aliyev's threat order. Aliyev knows this. That's why he doesn't in favor of this. Because that security risk will end, and Armenia, so many investments will flood in Armenia, and we have the brains, we have the IT companies, and we will be the Silicon Valley of the South Caucasus. I'm sure about it. Even Turkey doesn't have that technology, and we will have a market with 90 million people. Because you don't invest to a country which has 2.5 million population. But if you have a trade agreement, let's say, you invest in a country and you sell your goods or services to other countries, and you create an interdependency. That is my point. Of course, but some people might be against this, but no. Of course, some agricultural products might come from Turkey. But it's already coming to Georgia. It's already coming. If something is cheap, it comes to your country. But how can you subsidize that? Your farmers, let's say, you can just subsidize them. You can help them to adapt to the new reality, new conditions. That should be, as I said, if you don't engage with your neighbors, you either be, if you're a landlocked country, your economy will never grow, and you will be a poor country, and your army will never be strong, and you will not have a tourism. But if you are open your borders, start trade with your neighbors, you will get stronger, and your economy will get stronger, and your army will get stronger, and you will have a deterrence capacity. That is my point, and I'm working on it. I have all the parameters. In Washington, D.C., I'm working on this. And all the parameters that how Armenian economy is going to grow, and why Aliyev doesn't want this peace to happen, this border to happen. That's why he's sending money to Ankara for this border to not be open. So this is why I'm saying, if Aliyev doesn't want this border to open, and we don't want this border to open, one of this has to be wrong. He make a calculus, and we should make a calculus, to see which one is in favor of Armenia or which one. Thank you.
Mr. Paylan, thank you so much for your time with this constructive discussion. I think the Q&A now will be closed. We can take pictures, and then if Mr. Paylan stays for a little longer and you have a little personal questions, you can approach and ask.